Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 6th episode of the Leading Through People webinar series. Throughout the next hour, we'll be discussing and advising on innovation in the workplace and the importance for all organisations to innovate during these challenging times. So as a quick introduction, I'm Perill, and my role is Head of Business Development with FRS Recruitment. So in short, what I do is I consult with organisations that are hiring nationwide, all sizes, across all industries, and I collaborate with employers to create innovative recruitment strategies that deliver high-performance outcomes. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my two distinguished guest speakers, whom I've known for a few years now, and I have to say I greatly admire. Okay. So I have joining me Niamh Ryan, and Niamh Ryan is a Senior Vice President with Northern Trust, and her role is Head of Business Evolution. So in other words, organisation innovation is her area of expertise, is what she does day to day. So thanks, Niamh, for being here.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Also with Mairead Holland, who's front and centre. And Mairead is a senior HR business leader, having worked with Analog Devices for many years as a global HR business partner, and she's currently the Digital Collaboration Centre Manager with Innovate Limerick. So Mairead, I'm sure, will give us some great insights, in particular to the employee, the people side of innovation. So thanks to you, Mairead, for being here also.
Great, thanks, Derek.
So before we get started, there is a questions tab, and it is right here to ask a question. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar itself, and we'll address some, and others that we don't address, we'll commit to getting back to you after the audit is over the next couple of days. So really to kick this off, I think it's best that we define what actually innovation in the workplace is and why it's so important, particularly in times of crisis like this. So that question to you, Mairead.
Great. So innovation, what is it? And, you know, as the term innovation has been used, it's been a bit of a buzzword for quite a while. Everyone's hearing that it's a priority, but, you know, definitions of and understanding, I suppose, of what innovation actually is differ and can be somewhat ambiguous. Frankly, I quite like the ambiguity because it allows people and businesses to really find the right definition of it for themselves. First and foremost, innovation, it's really just a process of developing new and useful. And I think both of those terms are really important, that they're both new and they're useful solutions. And they operate in a continuum. So it might be something very small, incremental improvements to your current business, right up to kind of larger, radical new ventures for your business. Maybe, you know, playing in with new products or playing in new markets, etc. And, you know, at the best of times, innovation is important to continuously progress your business and move forward. In times like COVID, you know, I think that's when the world stops and realize just how essential it is, you know, where everyone has had to adapt and change their business. Look, schools and universities kind of moving online, shops who have, you know, shifted their focus from in-store to online, and offices absolutely everywhere kind of working remotely, even down to pubs, you know, doing takeaway pints. It doesn't, you know, people have had to evolve and change so that they can continue their business. And ultimately you have two choices. One, you do nothing and kind of ride out a storm and hope that the world returns to what it once was. Or two, you innovate. So you take control of the situation, consider what you can do differently, and you progress your business and you move forward. So ultimately, it's about finding new solutions to challenges, and they have to be useful and they have to have an impact for the business. Of the two solutions, you know, do nothing or innovate, my vote's on two, just in case I wasn't clear there. But yeah, that's how I see innovation, I suppose.
Yeah, great answer. Like, I totally agree. It's the small change right up to the strategic outcomes for adapting to the environment and delivering, I suppose, what the customer needs and making sure your business survives this particular crisis and thrives thereafter. Can I ask everybody who's joined in actually to go to the bottom of your screen and have a look at where it says polls down here? And there's two quick yes and no answers. It won't take you a few seconds. I'd like to just get the results of that before moving on to the next piece. So I'm just going to give everyone about 10 seconds to answer those two questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Just while we're doing that, I suppose, Mairead, you make an interesting point around the importance of innovation. So I think, at the moment, everyone can see how relevant and necessary it is, but innovation really is about a long-term outlook in terms of what you're doing with your business or what the value proposition of your business will be. So I absolutely agree with you. The importance of innovation has always been there. I mean, if we think even pre-COVID, the pace of change everywhere was really, really fast. And if you don't innovate and evolve the way that you're doing things, you're really not going to stay the test of time, and you're not going to be able to sustain your business model because everything around you is changing. So you can either change with it, or you can dig your heels in and still try and make your business relevant when everything around you is changing. So I think, me personally, COVID has just magnified the importance of innovation. And every single industry, every single business, no matter what size they are, you can't ignore the importance of it, but also you need to make sure that the way that you're innovating is relevant to your industry, is relevant to your business size. So, Mairead, you mentioned there radical innovation. So that's, I think, what everybody traditionally thinks of when you hear the word innovation. It has to be something really radical. It has to be something really massive that changes our way of working. And in reality, actually, most human beings can't cope with that type of radical innovation. Every scenario needs it. Sometimes it is that simple, piece by piece, step by step. How can we make the way that we're doing what we're doing better? And what can we learn from that process? What insights are there in how we're innovating around what our customers are looking for, what our teams are good at, what our purpose is. So I think there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of valuable and intangible things that you get from having an innovation strategy and making sure that your organisation, no matter what size, that you understand what your strategy is and how relevant that is for your industry and what you're trying to do.
I think that's a really valid point,
Good. You can actually just maybe lower the volume a little bit. There's a little bit of feedback coming through, and that should take care of it. And I'm just going to have a look at the poll results as well now, which will lead us on to the next section. Okay, so if you look at the first question, do you consider your organization to be innovative? 94% of people said yes, and only 6% said no. But then when we ask the next question, does your organization actually have an innovation strategy, like including formal processes to manage innovation? Only 68% said yes, and nearly a third said no. So there's a bit of discrepancy. There's a gap between the two. And really, part of this webinar is about addressing that gap and having a look at what you can do within your own organization to develop an innovation strategy. So it's something that I think every company should look at, and that's an innovation audit. So analysis and examination of what innovation is within your organization by going through the department, speaking to the leaders, speaking to the managers and your people on the ground as well as to how innovation is managed. So on that note, really it all begins with strategy. So let's talk about what innovation strategy within an organization looks like, and should there be one, and how it works. I can ask that question to you, Mairead.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes when people think strategy, and it's quite a high percentage of people who said no, that could be the case, and sometimes it just takes stopping and documenting things to realize, we do have a strategy here, we just haven't formalized it, we haven't written it down, and so it is important for businesses to kind of stop sometimes and just look and say, okay, what are we trying to do here? A lot of innovation initiatives frequently fail, right? Because people invest money in whatever it is, whether it's incremental changes or radical, and more radical changes tend to fail more often. And you can look at countless numbers of companies that have invested, I suppose, specific innovation effort and haven't reaped the rewards. You always hear mentioned, the bigger names, the Polaroids, Nokia, Yahoo, whoever it might be, who haven't been able to reap the rewards of the R&D money that they spent on developing their products for whatever reason. But the reality is that there's examples kind of scattered all over where people are putting money into changes of processes, changes of methodology, or new products, and they're not reaping the rewards because they're not meeting the market need. One of the biggest problems that occur with innovation improvement efforts, it's rooted in really the lack of an innovation strategy. So a strategy being just really kind of setting out what you want to achieve. So setting a competitive goal, that might be a longer term goal, and developing a set of coherent kind of steps to get you there. The purpose really and the value in having a clear strategy is it allows you to communicate what the role of innovation is for your business. And it helps align all stakeholders. So if you're a large multinational, it helps you align what senior leaders are thinking, what middle managers are thinking, what employees are thinking in terms of what innovation means for the company and how you create ideas, etc. It could be a smaller business and it aligns what the business owner, the board members, customers, feel about how innovative a company it is. It also allows for a business to drive performance improvement in a coordinated way. It allows you to measure the effort of whether the investment that you're making is really moving the dial in the way that you want it to. And I suppose just without having a formalized innovation strategy, innovation improvement efforts can just become uncoordinated and inefficient. And what you're doing is wasting good time and resources, I suppose, in the effort that you're making.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mairead. I think, when you start coming up with ideas, when you get into the idea generation piece, if you don't know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, you make suboptimal decisions. There can be an awful lot of waste in that innovation process where people are just literally debating, why a certain feature is required or why the scope should change on what you're trying to do. So absolutely starting off with a very clear strategic plan for innovation is really, really key. And that plan should absolutely have alignment to the strategic objectives of the organization. You don't want your innovation strategy going one way and your organization going in another way. They have to be aligned and they have to complement one another.
Yeah.
And that's a two-way street in my mind. So you'll see an awful lot of organizations that set, large strategic goals for themselves, and they have an innovation strategy that support those goals. But what we find in the innovation space is, again, you come back to the learning and insight piece, that corporate strategy has to listen to the innovation strategy. And there's loads of examples of that going on at the moment. One of the more interesting ones I've seen has been locally here in Tipperary. There's a company called Boris Lee Bottling. And pre-COVID, they had a business strategy where they were going high-end, high market with a premium water product. And COVID, and they had an innovation strategy where they were kind of moving and seeing various different products in the water distribution world that they were experimenting with. And when COVID hit, they recognized two things. First of all, high end was probably not going to be advisable as a strategy going forward past COVID. But second of all, they had actually a really quality product in experimentation that really met with the pre-COVID or the post-COVID world where everyone's going to get really, really conscious about their health, really, really conscious about the environment, all of these trends that were there pre-COVID but have really been magnified through COVID. So they now have a new product that they've launched within a matter of weeks, which really is going to probably be their core product, into the future. So I think, again, corporate strategy versus innovation strategy, knowing how the two complement each other and then listening to how the context is changing for both.
I think that's really great.
Does that make sense?
Great, it does indeed. Thanks for that, Niamh. Okay, so you mentioned there creating and managing ideas. Both of you mentioned that in your last piece. So there's very interesting research actually done by Stanford for larger corporations. They did some surveys, and basically the research that they put into it kind of realized that about 4,000 ideas have to be generated in order to get through to 2 or 3 commercial successes. So that's a massive amount of idea generation. So how do companies manage that? How do they cope with that volume? Did they even get that amount of ideas through? And that question to you, Niamh.
It's a real problem, right? Because I think we all I suppose let's just define an idea, right? So first of all, where do ideas come from? They come from everywhere, and notably they come from somebody finding a problem with something. Okay, and I think actually culturally here in Ireland, we are really good at finding problems. And where the ideation comes from is where you take that problem, define it, refine it, and then come up with a number of different options to solution that problem. Okay, understanding its value, so on and so forth. So really, the ideas come from observation, observing what's going on, trying to anticipate what's going to happen in the market is also really, really key to generate good ideas. But I don't think, Derek, to your point, there's no getting away from the volume of ideas that you're going to cultivate. So when you think about innovation in your organization, you need a process for recognizing the ideas, sieving through those ideas, and really coming out with the ones that you think are going to give you a viable value at the end. So you go through this process of identifying problems, refining problems, being clear on what the value might be or the opportunity might be. And then the point comes in, which really is back to your strategy point, Mairead, earlier on, which is you need to identify the ideas that are most aligned to your strategy and the ones that will actually lead you in the direction that you want to go. And that will still involve experimentation. That will still involve, fostering this culture of being willing to try something, but also being able to fail fast. And I think that's key. You don't want to go into an idea and start developing it and testing it and prototyping it, only to find out actually, 3 or 4 weeks in, at the beginning, it's probably not going to give you the return that you look for. So I think having that culture and that process where you're looking at your idea all the way through from concept to experiment into test, prototype, and before market launch, you really want to be looking at that really, really carefully, and all the way along continuing to actually critique its value aligned with your strategy so that you come out with a product that is fit for purpose, that is ready for the market, that will actually get you what you set out to achieve in the first instance. So I think in terms of creating ideas, should never be a problem in terms of the number of ideas, but to your point, that survey really does tell you have to sift through an awful lot of them to get to the real gems. And sometimes it's not one idea on its own. Sometimes it's actually a combination of ideas together that come up with a new idea that actually solves the problem holistically in terms of what you're looking for. We've loads of examples of that in Northern Trust. In terms of the problem statements that come through, you have loads of people coming in saying, I want you to put a robot on this process and automate it. And then you ask the question, why are you doing the process? If a robot can come in and actually automate it, then before you start investing money in automation, you need to ask yourself the question, what's the value in the process? And if you can retire it early or change it, make it more efficient, then that's probably the most cost-effective way of innovating, rather than just layering on lots of technology and then having to suffer the maintenance issues that brings. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. Really good. Yeah. And do you think companies actually have a process in place to store and filter through these ideas? So if you're looking at creating hundreds of ideas over the space of a month, I mean, how do companies do this? Do they have a formal process where you go to your manager? Is this stored online? How do you cultivate that type of an environment?
I would hazard a guess that in most organizations, the idea generation is pretty informal. That there are individuals who have that confidence to think about things differently and know the person to go to within their organization to pitch that idea, which is a problem, because there's so many people that can come up with so many different perspectives and ideas. You don't want it to be always coming from the same individuals through the same route and getting the same end result. So I would argue that you do need some mechanism for identifying where the ideas are coming from, where you can generate the ideas in a group situation, be it through Kaizen events or clinics or workshops, or sometimes just, one of the things we find really, really, really meaningful in Northern is we just go around to team meetings sometimes and listen and sit down and observe the dialogue that's going on and understand, because that's where you get people talk about their problems. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for people to tell you what their issues are. And likewise with clients, your clients are always going to tell you when, they have a problem, or the clients that won't tell you, they'll probably leave. So you need to be fostering that kind of relationship with people to actually generate those ideas and get those insights. But I think to your point, Derek, around formalizing the process, take very little to have a process where you actually say, I went to this meeting today, I got this idea, I need to write it down somewhere, and I need someone in my organisation who's going to pick that up and vet it and take it somewhere. So, problem is one thing, idea is another thing. Action in that idea is really, really key.
I have, onto that point though, I have seen a lot of organisations are prioritising the formalising and kind of realising the need for the formalising. A lot of, are starting to develop continuous improvement councils and, specific targeted groups of people who will focus on idea generation, on helping and fostering, as Niamh mentioned, that culture of people putting their ideas forward, for recognising issues in processes, in products, and I think, Niamh, your point is completely valid. It's building that into the everyday. It's bringing that into team meetings. It's ensuring that all levels of managers kind of foster that as your everyday culture of the organisation, so that people don't sit around with the ideas in their heads. They just say them, and they just bring them up. But it is ideal for organizations to make a more formal process, to be able to, so things that don't get missed, right? Because people are busy every day, and suddenly you have an idea and you say to your manager, and with best of intent, it's gone because you get stuck into your project. So, having something like a continuous improvement council, or, promoting continuous improvement events where people showcase ideas, they put ideas forward, best ones get nominated, whatever it might be, but something that kind of forces you to stop just forgetting about it and putting it on the long finger,
moving on,
busy doing the everyday work.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, Mairead, what is really, really crucial, because I think every organisation can afford to do that. That's not a cost issue. Right? Yeah. Everyone can afford to sit down, and dedicate a couple of hours a month to brainstorming and, rethinking and trying to foster new ways of working. Everyone can do that, and everyone can list problems, and everyone can ideate. But what actually happens in reality is, you do that for a while and everyone's really excited about it and everyone really gets involved, and then it becomes a management and maintenance issue of the volume. Right? And if you don't manage that volume, if you don't have a feedback loop that says, we had a Kaizen event, or we had, a continuous improvement clinic last month, these are the 10 things that came out of it, right? And then nobody hears about it forever, or maybe hears about one thing. It's really, really important that you have a process or a person that is responsible for ensuring that all of those ideas get responded to, and people understand, if an idea doesn't go all the way through to development, that they understand why. Because that feedback loop will tell them and educate them around the potential gaps in their own story. Maybe it was a really, really good idea, but we didn't actually frame it correctly, or we didn't really have an appreciation of the value that it could deliver. So that feedback loop and managing those ideas fosters more ideas and makes those ideas better in the future. So for me, the critical thing is, don't make it a fad. Don't make it something that you can't maintain. Don't go too big too quickly, but make sure that, if you're going to do something, be authentic with it and show commitment to actually follow it through, and make sure that people are getting that feedback so that they learn from it and they can go again and they get recognized for it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Without the feedback, I don't feel and maybe would be very slow to come back again with another idea in future if they're ignored. So it's can't be understated, really, the importance of keeping that feedback going throughout the process. So look, everybody has a great idea, and that's one of the issues, is filtering through all of the crap ideas to get to the ones that you can commercialize, and that's the reality of the workplace. So on that note, how do you even go about selecting and prioritizing ideas, the right ideas, and then moving them through? When you're dealing with I suppose you're fostering, you're encouraging people to come to you with ideas, and then you're rejecting some and selecting others as part of an innovation process. What should that look like, Mairead?
Yeah, and that is tough. And I suppose, kind of weeding through the crap ideas, sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes what you've got is tons of really, really good ideas, and that becomes the challenge, because it is about prioritization. Most businesses really have probably infinite lists of things that they could do. And it's about, but what they don't have is kind of infinite resources. So they don't have the time, they don't have the cash, they don't have the people, whatever it might be. So it becomes this really, really difficult process of oftentimes prioritizing from a lot of really, really good ideas. So it's important that, you know, those ideas or projects or whatever they might be are evaluated to see, firstly, and Niamh spoke about this earlier, it's about, do they align with the business strategy, right? First and foremost, are they going to help us get to where we're trying to go? You know, are they in a coordinated way, or is it something that's taken us off on a tangent? And that helps, you know, does the idea align with the business strategy? And do they offer us bang for our buck? Because for most projects and most ideas, it's going to cost money, right? And you have to kind of look at where's the biggest play here? Where is the one that's either going to move us further in terms of our growth strategy, which is the one that's going to be the most from a cost-cutting initiative it might be. But where do we get the most value for our money when we kind of prioritize these projects? Which ones move the dial for the business most and have the potential, I suppose, to be most impactful? Every single project that you do is, or idea that you select, there's an opportunity cost to the business. And so it's really important to look at them and look at them in a holistic way, and you're comparing. So you have to take those 4,000 ideas to get to really good ideas. And it's about really funneling those. And Niamh mentioned this earlier, and I think it's a really great point, but it's, you know, you can take risks, but you have to look for continuous feedback so that, you know, if you decide these are the ones we're going to focus on, but continuously look for feedback, because you might realize quite shortly into the process, if you're getting continuous feedback, is that this is actually not the best use of our resources, you know, and instead of just because you've committed to it and, you know, you want to complete it, don't get rid of it if it's not going to have the biggest impact, because there is an opportunity cost of continuing with that idea or that idea. So I think it's about really whittling it down to what you consider to be the ones that are going to be most impactful, that are going to move the dial for the business in the greatest way, but also being willing to continuously review those ideas and be willing to scrap ideas. And that's a challenge for people, because you get teams of people involved in something and they become committed, and they will the success of the project, regardless of whether it's actually going to have market success or not. So it's about being open and willing to continuously listen to feedback and continuously review where you're investing your resources. So it's not easy is the answer, really.
And that's that selection approach, Mairead. Like, I mean, you spoke there about, you know, the alignment of strategy and the prioritization and things like that. And I think, you know, what's really important is that you're very transparent around how your selection process works, so that no one's, you know, you don't have this kind of black hole where ideas go in and then suddenly a selection process happens and nobody has any idea or consistency around what gets selected or why it gets selected. So I think even being very transparent around how the selection process works, back to the idea generation and problem statement definition, if people are clear on how things get selected, then they will actually position their ideas appropriately, and they will tell a story around their ideas, and they will have put thought into how the value could be generated. Because that selection point, it's still an experiment, right? It's still, there's no guarantee it's going to give you what you need, but you need to have some confidence going into the selection criteria that you're able to demonstrate the commercial value of spending resource time on it, right? To your point, Mairead, as well around resourcing, but don't try and attempt something that you don't have the resources to actually fulfill. Really, really straightforward. Like, if you aren't a tech company, you're going to know as part of the selection criteria process, you're going to have to say, well, I'm going to have to bring somebody in who has this skill set to help us do X, Y, and Z, you know? So just, I think around the selection process, help yourselves by from a selection person's perspective, being very transparent around what your criteria are. And then from the people who are putting ideas in for selection, be really, really clear on how you're positioning the value of your proposal and making sure that you have a really strong business case around the proposal you're putting forward. It's not saying that you're going to absolutely deliver it 100% return on investment, 2x, 5x, whatever the case may be. That's not what selection is about. It's about knowing and understanding the potential of an idea, and having confidence going into that selection process. But I think objectivity, transparency, and even if you have like a formula that you can show to your organization to say, when I'm selecting an idea, I think about how much it's going to cost me. I'm going to think about how long it's going to take. I'm going to think about what, whether or not my customer is actually going to be interested, or what evidence is there to suggest that my customer would be willing to actually buy this product when I have it developed. So all of these things, and the scale of your organization, the resources that you have at hand, all of those things I think are really, really important, but definitely giving that clarity to the people who are coming up with the ideas makes their ideas better.
Great. Thank you, Niamh. Last year, we went through an organisation, Operations Excellence Programme, which was all about innovation and small increments right up to big changes within the organisation. And the planning was good. It was, went on for quite some time. A lot of idea generation, a lot of people getting involved in how we transform the business. But the most difficult part by a country mile was implementation. Just so difficult to actually start realizing the plans. And it took time to get there, and very much so worked in the end. But looking back, it was the implementation stage for me that was by far the most challenging. So on that note, we put together an innovation plan, talking around implementation, how people overcome maybe implementation challenges. To you, Niamh.
So 90% of all change products fail on implementation? I think I read that somewhere. And I can understand why. I can understand why, because the reality is, it's the last thing we think about. We get so engrossed in the idea and the concept and selling it and everyone buying into it. And then it comes to implementation, we just think it's going to happen. But the reality is that implementation is where you have the most people involved in your idea. And the more people that are involved in it, the more likely it is that something will not go exactly to plan, because we're human. We all have our own interests. We all have our own preferences. We all have our own priorities. But implementation is not something that you should overlook when you think about innovation, and it does require focus. So if I was to kind of divvy up my costs on an innovation, I would probably put 50% of them towards implementation and making sure that I had the right structure, the right support, the right training in my implementation approach. But really, I think one of the key things is when you're implementing, someone just rejects something from the get-go. And one of the things that we found really, really useful is that when you're looking at implementation, if you develop more of an incremental approach and collaborate with potentially your end customer, they get invested in the idea and they can give you really good insights into how to make your idea actually better. So you go into implementation with a very strong idea, with a very clear purpose and a very clear objective. But through your implementation, you will need to refine your product, you will need to refine your service, and you will need to refine your process based on the people you're working with. And if you do not do that, the chances are you'll come out with a product that doesn't land. So implementation and giving it focus and having a structure around it is really, really important. I think there's other, things that people talk about in the innovation sphere. You talk about design thinking and agile, approaches and DevOps teams and all of this cool stuff. And the reality is it's really, really simple. It doesn't actually take a lot of resources and a lot of people to get something done, but you need the right people, you need to give it some time, and you need to fail fast. So again, if you've gone into ideation, you've got your funding, you've got your backing, Mairead, you mentioned it earlier on, path dependency. Don't keep going with it if you see halfway through or even 2 weeks in that actually what I thought I was gonna do isn't going to work out for it because I don't have the tech, or what I thought I was going to get from the market in terms of data isn't going to be there, or the timing of this is wrong. The context has changed in the market. People no longer want this because something else has come on board. Like, failing fast and documenting and telling a story around why it failed will make the next one better. But I think we all can get a little bit carried away, especially myself, and I do this day in, day out. You get so convinced that your idea is going to work, right? You're so convinced that people just need to come on board with my idea. People just need to come on board with the way that I'm thinking. But the reality is you need to sit back and you need to listen to the people you're working with during implementation, and pivot if you need to pivot. Fail and stop if you need to stop, and then accelerate where you need to accelerate. And as I said, what you go into doing at the beginning very, very randomly ends up being the end product that you come out with at the end. So, you know, we personally in Northern Trust have an agile approach which works very well for us, where we have incremental cycles of development. So as we're building, as we're testing, we're working with end users and they're telling us that feature works. Actually, no, that doesn't work for us. We don't need that. And we're learning as we go. And because we're delivering incrementally, the speed of that is actually very, very quick. So if someone's giving us a resource to help us on an idea, they can see after 2 weeks that they have a feature that works. And they're more likely to give us more resources and more time and more insights as they see that going through. And we've done that internally with end users, but we've also done that with clients, and the clients love it. The clients love nothing more than having their voice heard in terms of, well, Northern Trust are really taking my perspective on board, and I can see the end result and I can see where my input has gone into it. So then when it comes to launch, they are behind it, they're backing it, they want more of it. And you know, it's really simple. And I know we put loads of jargon and there's loads of, you know, Harvard, Stanford, all of these very, very well established institutions have, you know, written and documented the, you know, the benefits of all this. But for me, it's really, really common sense stuff. Don't overstretch yourself, and you know, keep in contact with the people that you're developing for, but listen to them. If you're not listening to them, it's kind of pointless if you have a big agile DevOps team, or if you have the best of technology. If you're not taking in that customer feedback, then, you know, you might succeed day one, but day two, day three probably won't be a long sustainable product that you've launched or revenue stream that you're going after.
Great.
I don't know, Mairead, have you seen that in the Innovation Hub? Is it a similar type of approach that's being taken?
And not so much in the Innovation Hub, because we're kind of a collaboration centre, and we bring together different groups. In previous lifetime, I've just come from kind of, you know, product development organisation where it was all in design and development. And, you know, and I love how you describe it as common sense. And it is when you sit back and think about it. When you're in the middle of it, it absolutely doesn't feel like common sense a lot of the time, and you can see it with groups who are defensive of the product. You know, you talked about path dependency, but you know, groups that they cling to the sunk cost of a project and are just committed to finishing it regardless. And it's really human nature kind of tendency to kind of start on something and want to achieve the end goal. So it is common sense when you sit back and you're not emotionally attached to it and say, I want to be willing to be open to hear customer feedback, you know, because that is common sense. Like that is who's going to give you how you're going to generate the revenue in the end. But in the middle of it, it's not, you know. So I think it's really important for groups and organizations to stop and think about that in team meetings, for managers, project leaders, to stop and build that in and, you know, evaluate the project on a continuous basis and help the team see that that's not failure. If you hear something that you don't want to hear from the customer, that's a success, because that's going to help you towards the path you should be going on, rather than feeling defensive and feel like you failed in some way. So while it is common sense, yet human nature is to act completely different. Like, we self-sabotage as humans quite a lot of the time. And I think this is a perfect example of it. So it is about building into the culture, not to be afraid to get that feedback, to actually value it, to embrace it, to welcome it and feel like, oh, this is like a gift, because it now sets me on the track that I need to be going on. So
and do you think Mairead, like to that end, like, because, you know, especially in the implementation, does there need to be a level of confidence demonstrated by the individuals involved to be willing to stand up and say, actually, do you know what, that failed, that didn't work?
100%.
How do we do it? Like, how do we get better at that? How do we get, you know, people to feel as if they can stand up and say, do you know what, we tried that, but it didn't work? Because ultimately, I think, you know, certainly from my perspective, I have no problem standing up and doing that, but I get a sense from people that, you know, if they do that, then they feel there's going to be background conversations about, oh God, look, we gave them X amount of money to do X amount, it didn't happen. You know, what are we doing here, kind of thing. Like how do we overcome that?
I think it's a major leadership. And I think a lot of that falls on the leadership of an organization, because that has become another buzzword. It is failing fast, for all the right reasons. And I think people understand it fundamentally at a kind of academic level, but in practice they don't. So leaders can say, there's often comments made or point to past failures of a team, a project team. Oh, I'm not doing that again. What about the time we did that and it didn't work out? So there's lots of things that I see that can impact the culture of an organization, even though leadership teams talk about failing fast. And you'll see a couple of events about showcasing failures, which I support, and I think that's a really good idea. Is if a project failed and there's great learnings from it, showcase it, share the learnings, make it look like it's okay. But it's also about being very conscious of everyday conversation, everyday leadership comments that they make, to make it feel safer for teams to, not be so concerned that there will be a backlash. And that plays into every single people process, so that when it comes to people being promoted, that they're not being pointed to going, they were on that dog of a project, or, whatever it be, because those things happen and they creep into an organization where people are kind of making the decisions about people, and they're saying they've been attached to this successful project, or they've been attached to the not so successful project, and that impacts people. So you kind of go, no, you say it's okay to fail, however my career seems to have taken has stalled since, or compensation decisions are being made. So I think it's about everything supporting the failure and not having processes like people processes contradicting the idea of failing fast. And I personally think that with the best of intention, it's so easy for those things to creep in and override the good work that's being done around kind of the failing and the okay in failing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, the American culture is very much so, fail fast, and it really is recognized and nearly rewarded as in, okay, you've tried to do something a few times, keep going at it until you succeed. And that hasn't been the mentality in Ireland. Do you think that has shifted in recent years, though? That failure is seen as failure, disaster, good luck, goodbye, you had your chance, out the door.
I think people are talking about it more. I think I just think at an academic level, people are getting it more. I still don't. I don't see the huge change. I still think there's huge kind of personal, and it's really a private thing that people want to be able to succeed, and they want to succeed in that initial mission, not the one that got derailed and kind of moved in a way that they weren't considering at the beginning. I just don't. I think we have a long way to go, is the truth.
Yeah, I think so too. So how would you, I suppose, how would you describe as an ideal situation from a people strategy? This keeps coming back to people, ideas, how they're managed, how they're encouraged and brought through a process. So what does the ideal situation look like for companies of all sizes?
Yeah, I think, from a people perspective, and I personally, look, I'm biased from a kind of HR background. Yeah. I think people are really, when you're talking about people, that gets to the crux of innovation, because I think the impact, for every idea, there's people behind everything. Whether they're employees, middle managers, senior leaders, but everything that happens within a business, if you want to be innovative, the structure has to be designed to support this, right? So that is what we've talked about, is this kind of creeping culture of talking at a high level about what an innovation is about and what you want the business to do in terms of your innovation strategy. But if your people processes don't support it, it's kind of a wasted journey, in my opinion. There's kind of three main areas I would consider when looking at people. The culture of the business, first and foremost. Does the culture of your organization promote innovation? because I've seen so many organizations that pride themselves on how innovative they are. And then when you speak with employees of the business, their impression can be quite different. So, you know, an organization might feel like they have a culture where people can put their ideas forward, but you talk to employees and they have completely different ideas about where a project is going, and they keep it to themselves. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And you know, what is happening within an organization that allows that to happen? To create a really innovative company, right, the culture needs to be open. It needs to be inclusive, where everyone feels like their voice is heard, where they can put their ideas forward, where they can shape projects or, you know, methodologies or whatever it might be, that they can provide input to other projects. You know, they have to understand where the business is going, and they have to be able to connect themselves, their role, what they can do to the business goal. And they have to feel like, you know, if they have questions, that they can ask them, that if they have the ideas, they can put them forward. And we talked about this a minute ago. It's you know, businesses think themselves as open. If you have a new employee and they come in and ask questions about why we do something a certain way, and, you know, somebody who's been there a long time suggests this is just the way we've always done it, or it's just how we do things around here, or a new employee puts an idea forward and someone kind of says, that would never work around here. Those things happen in everyday conversations. There are also things that suddenly close up someone for putting ideas forward or asking questions. So I think we all, at every level in the organization, need to be aware of that and need to be conscious of it, and to encourage and promote people for putting their ideas forward, for asking questions. You know, you need to create a culture where people are inquisitive and curious and want to know why something is done a particular way. Because if it isn't, you know, then you need to stop and reflect and go, maybe we should be doing things different. Maybe we should be evolving and changing. So I think, you know, first and foremost, the company culture. Second, and Derek, you'd speak to this a whole lot better than me, is from a recruitment perspective. You know, we all have a natural tendency to kind of hire in our image and likeness, and it doesn't lead to the most diverse teams. And you know, any kind of research will show you that, you know, for more innovative companies and innovative products, you want diversity of thought. You know, you want people from different backgrounds, different ideas. You don't want that group think. You want somebody who's going to come up with something completely different, and that will promote discussion around the table. So I think that needs to be built into recruitment processes, that, you know, continuing to hire more and more of the same person might feel like a very gelled, nice type of work environment. It doesn't necessarily lead to the most innovative kind of environment, because what you end up is people who think the same or naturally aligned to the same idea. And sometimes what you need is somebody who's coming in with a contradictory thought, and is willing to challenge ideas and put different types of ideas forward. So I think
Mairead, do you see companies now like assessing people as part of their interview criteria?
Yeah,
as to whether they would have a growth mindset or a closed mindset? Do you see that?
I think, you know, when you look at traditionally, recruitment was much more about, you know, where has the person studied? Have they got the skills, the technical skills to do the role? And where it's shifting is more about behavioral, you know, so what has the person achieved? What kind of way do they work? Are they somebody who puts ideas forward? Are they somebody who's innovative in terms of thinking? Do they take initiative? Do they lead projects? You know, and it is more focused on looking at the behaviors rather than just the technical competence.
Yeah,
you'd hope it would be. You know, a lot of companies are moving that way. Ones that aren't tend to just get domain expertise in a particular area. But to have more rounded people, you know, you're looking at CVs and you're looking, okay, have they actually contributed to things outside their domain expertise? Have they developed that, when you look at innovation, that T-shaped kind of model of, yes, it's important to have deep domain expertise, but it's also important to be broad and that you have a more holistic view of how business works, that you can understand customers, that you understand business, how business works, the financials, because it's all well and good having somebody who's technically competent, but if they don't understand, but it takes a whole lot of money to create the project or the product that you're thinking, or the market actually doesn't want the product that you're thinking, so you want somebody who's broader, so has that T-shaped domain expertise in a particular area, but is also more of a general thinker. And that comes through in kind of behavior-based kind of interviewing.
A lot of that.
Sprint initiatives, tiger teams, have they done different things in cross-functional kind of work? Derek, you might describe more. You'd be more of say in terms of the recruitment aspect than I would.
Yeah, I suppose we're seeing it more with bigger organizations that might have more developed HR departments and have more expertise behind them, and trying to get that message across to SMEs as well as to how to look at candidates that aren't, as you said, like maybe not technically an ideal match, but are creative and problem solvers and have a learning mindset.
Yeah.
Who's logged in, who is from an IT background, and I won't name names, and I would consider that person very creative, worked at a project with a point, and has a marketing mindset, sales mindset. I think you could put him in any department and he'd flourish. And that's what you want. You want people who can adapt to the new, I suppose, working environment, which isn't just you're in payroll and that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. We want somebody who can come into an organization and contribute, that can get involved in other teams, put the software people in with the payroll people, in with customer service, in with sales, marketing, HR, and come up with ideas, work on projects together and think outside of their own area of expertise. So seeing a lot more of that, and it makes perfect sense. And it's obviously setting companies aside from others, setting people aside from the competition.
Yeah, I think, as businesses become more and more agile and need to become more and more agile for the market, people need to become more and more agile. People need to be able to continue to keep their, learn new things, learn new skill sets, be able to pivot. Because what you'll find is if you stay in the same role for the same length of time and you don't kind of look up and see what else is going on in the world, suddenly you're obsolete. That it's unfortunate, but it's a reality in a lot of situations, is that you have to evolve. You have to realize that there's more to do and the world is evolving and you have to evolve with it. So I think it's hugely important in recruitment that you're considering that. The third aspect I was just going to mention in terms of people is and you've already mentioned it.
You didn't forget there was a third.
But it's about recognition, and it's about, making sure that when people are putting ideas forward, if people are successful in terms of what they've done, if people fail and learn from it and share this learning, that you recognize, you reward. You don't necessarily, that can be financial or non-financial, but it's about recognizing people and the effort that you're making. If you want to create a culture that promotes innovation, recognize when people do it and display the behaviors that you want them to display so that they know, okay, this is what's been asked of me and I'll be recognized when I do it. So I think it's hugely important from a people's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, absolutely nail on the head there with the recognition on failing. I think back to that point on failing, people don't do it because they personalize it rather than it being a failure of an actual activity or process within the organization. We all as humans will personalize it and say, oh, it was my failure, or, I was involved in it and what does that mean for me? But I think if you can reinforce that actually something that is recognized and celebrated as part of a formal process within your organization, then you will start to change people's minds around, putting the hand up and saying, do you know what, I felt. And that's not encouraging people to just try things and fail for the sake of getting, opportunities. It has to be authentic, but really that recognition and that compensation program and how it relates to innovation is really, really important. And absolutely right, it doesn't have to be financial, like Derek, you made the point there around, the trend in the market. We all have to be doing more in different domains, that kind of mindset of, I grew up as an accountant and I'll be an accountant for the rest of my days. That really is going to have to change. Some of the jobs that are there today aren't going to be there in 10 years' time. So if we don't all get on board with actually, what I know and what I learned in college will see me through my entire career, it's not going to. We always have to be continually educating ourselves and pushing ourselves outside of the realms and trying new things and trying new jobs. And innovation is a way of actually providing that for your team. because you can say to them, oh, come on and join this project and learn how to be a business analyst, or come onto this project and tell me, how would we market it? How would I sell this? What story? And you start to kind of get people's other skills involved in their job, and they start bringing their whole selves to work, rather than I know how to be an accountant, or I know how to be an engineer, or I know how to be, a project manager. Actually, as individuals, we crave an awful lot more than, boxing ourselves into these kind of careers that, really in the future are going to limit our capability to kind of move and grow as individuals.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So moving on to the final part of an innovation audit, really should be the market launch. So you've got your people strategy right, you have your idea generation, you have all of the components in place, and you're implementing. We have about 5 minutes as well, just to throw the time out there. So what will market launch look like? What's best practice there, Niamh?
Market launch, right? Really, and I'm not going to labour this point, because actually the market launch, if you've done all of those other 5 things right, you have your strategy, if you know how to generate and cultivate ideas, you know how to select the right ones, you're doing the right thing with your people. Market launch is all about timing, right? So people don't buy concepts. They're not interested in a test. They're not interested in an experiment. They want the actual thing that you said you were going to deliver. So you need to make sure that it's ready. Okay, when it's ready, it might mean that you deploy it in a specific region or a specific capacity, but that whole feature is ready to be used as you think it should be used. So I think, for me, product launches, make sure that your timing is right and make sure that your product is ready. And then the last thing about product launch is the way in which you're going to market it and the channel that you're going to market it through. So again, every organization is going to be different. We've seen an awful lot of it online at the moment with businesses, moving to online. They're using social media platforms, etc., etc. It's going to be specific to your business, and it's going to be specific to your industry. When we launch something in Northern Trust, it's a much more settled launch. We do it through our recognized relationships. We'll go to a client, or we'll go to a provider and say, this is what we have, would you like to work with us on it, or would you like to launch this on? And then it builds from there. So it's going, the way in which you market, the channels through which you launch your product have to be relevant for your business. And seeing how others have done it and observing the successes that they've had, learn from it. You don't have to recreate these things from scratch. You don't have to be innovative in every single aspect of your product. Do the things that work really, really well, and you should get the right launch for the thing that you're looking to do. So yeah, keep it really, really simple. Do your research, make it relevant, and make sure that it's ready and it's on time. And you know what? Sometimes you can come to product launch and recognize that context has changed. With a lot of uncertainty at the moment, context has changed, and just park it. So it's not right now. It's not the area to be doing it right now. And you may revisit in 6 months' time or 4 weeks' time, but just make sure that you've kind of done that surveying of the land before you kind of enter into the launch process.
Brilliant. You touched on something very topical there at the moment, which is the whole work from home piece as well, Niamh, and technology and how we're innovating at present. I mean, overnight, everyone had to change or adapt their business model to the COVID crisis. And to go online, to manage staff online, to motivate, to speak with people. We're all on video. We're doing webinars instead of conferences. So big changes happen very, very quickly. So it just goes kind of to show the speed at which companies can innovate and can change when there's a necessity to do so, when the gun's against the head, so to speak. We conducted an FRS Recruitment, an employer survey with about 250 respondents a couple of weeks ago, which we're releasing this week on our website. And it was I suppose one of the key results is there's a lot of positivity around people working from home. So business models shifting from 50 people being in an office to everybody working from home. And the results are, they really kind of spell out how employers feel that they've adapted well to people working from home, and that they were getting as much performance, and in some cases more performance from people working from home than in an office environment. So I think, look, obviously technology is changing everything. We're going to have to catch up with the environment very, very quickly if you're behind in online retail and in online business. So just very quickly to yourself, Mairead, on that, technology advances and working from home, and I suppose the digital disruption that's going on at the moment. So how important is that from an innovation perspective?
Well, digital disruption, I suppose, you kind of look at it from lots of angles, and it could be it can be your actual business. Is how do you digitally disrupt the market, you know, and that's your Ubers or your Airbnb. How do you disrupt an entire market by using technology and making things cheaper and more accessible to people? Both examples actually are questionable at the moment in COVID, and it'd be interesting to see how Airbnb and Uber and the lasting impacts. But then, you know, then you have you're using technology to advance your business, like remote working, you know, and I think this has been a really interesting time, because there, you know, a lot of organizations who have you know, been moving more towards allowing the flexibility, at least, of kind of remote working. But you have a lot of organizations who are completely closed to it, and I think this has forced their hand in terms of no choice but to leave people work from home. And, you know, what you're going to find is the likes of Twitter and Square have now said permanently people can work from home. Facebook have said that they expect tens of thousands of people to work from home remote or permanently. And within the next 5 to 10 years, I think Zuckerberg has said he expects at least 50% of his workforce will be working from home. It's going to change the landscape. So when you talk about the future of work, you know, that's happening now. You can actually visibly see what's happening. And I think this is, you know, employers, it's important that you listen to the feedback that you're going to get from employees. I don't think everyone's going to be completely open to have everyone work from home. But you have to look at the market and go, okay, as an employer market, so now you're not talking about your customer market, you're talking about your employer. So now you have your employees, and if there's going to be a huge push from employees to work from home, what are you going to do to retain them if you were saying you can't do that? So it's about employers and businesses, I think, at this stage, really being open-minded and really seeing what can work for our business, what can work in the long term, what do our employees need and want, and what do I need to do to retain them and keep them and have them impact in the best way. So I think everyone has to look at technology for that. You know, that is sudden meetings become, you know, Zoom meetings or whatever technology you're using, and you just can't close your eyes and pretend that that's not happening. I think all businesses, not that they have to move to the extremes of, you know, saying everyone can now work from home at their own, you know, discretion, but it's about realizing that if you don't maintain flexibility, that you might start losing employees who now suddenly can see the world has changed, and we've proven that you can work efficiently and effectively from home. There's challenges for that. You know, how do you engage your employees? How do you feel like they belong to the organization if they're not physically in the organization? But, you know, those are things that in terms of communication, using technology effectively, engaging your leaders in being part of that story and being inclusive. You know, there's plenty of ways to overcome it. But I think we're all a little naive if we say the world is going to revert back to exactly the way it is and you know, without expectations. My opinion is that an employer is going to be quite naive, and you know, we need to look at what is feasible for the business and what's feasible for employees.
Yeah, and that's a nice way to wrap this up. You know, it really is, now is a time to make the changes. If you don't, you're going to get left behind. We're going into a very competitive, difficult time period, a recession, and some companies will come out the other end stronger, and other companies who stand still simply won't. So on that bright note, I'd like to again thank Niamh and Mairead. Listen, they were fantastic insights and advice, and it's really much appreciated. Thanks to everybody who's joined into the webinar for listening. I truly hope you've taken something valuable away from today's webinar. And there's some questions there that we'll come back to you on afterwards. And if anybody wants to continue this conversation with me or any organizations who'd like to discuss this further in the coming days, have an off the record call and talk about this in more detail, you'll find me, and my details are on LinkedIn or on the FRS Recruitment website. So Niamh and Mairead, thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Great.
All the best.
Thank you.